We're ready to go. Oh, thank you.
Oh, wow.
Um.
Yeah,
All right, good morning. Good morning. My name is Haley Lyons, and I am the chair of the Board of Accountancy, and I'm calling this public meeting of the State of Oregon Board of Accountancy to order. If I had my gavel, which I don't, I would bang it. Today is Thursday, June 5th, and it is 8:37 a.m. This meeting is being held in Trenton at the board offices on 200 Hawthorne Avenue Southeast, Suite D450, Salem, Oregon 97301. This meeting is being recorded. Zoom participation is also enabled. If you are participating in this meeting by Zoom, please be sure to mute your microphone and unmute only when you are called upon to speak. Please do not use the chat room for any discussions. Should any technical issues arise, the meeting will be paused until they are resolved or delayed until they are resolved. I will now take a roll call of members and guests. I will first take a roll call of those in the room and then we'll ask you to identify yourself if you are participating by phone or by Zoom. Great, thank you.
Are you aware that the video in the conference room there is not on?
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. There you are. Now I see.
No, I was not aware, and so thank you. Okay, we're going around.
Martin Petione, Executive Director.
Mike Mead, guest and CPA.
Joe Sullivan, Board Member.
Maya Lepper, board staff.
Logan Steele, Board Member.
Keith Robinson, board treasurer. Jason Orm, chair of Laws and Rules Committee.
Angie Hunt, Board Legal Counsel.
Raul Valdivia, vice chair.
Andrew Barlow, board staff. Quinn Stoddard, board staff.
Sherry McPherson, CEO of Oregon Society of CPAs.
So let's go to those on Zoom. Megan?
Megan Hurst. Oh, go ahead, Megan Hartley.
Megan Hartley, board member.
Awesome. Megan?
Megan Kurz, OSCPA liaison.
Amanda?
Amanda Fells, OAIA liaison.
Thank you. And do we have anybody else that is not on? Okay, great. All right, agenda review and approval. With respect to item 2, review and approval of the draft public session agenda for today. Everyone should have seen it and had an opportunity to review. I do not know of any edits at this point. Do you all have any edits? Okay, so reminder on how we do motions and voting. You got to say your name, basically. So can I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Jason Robinson, I make a motion to approve as presented.
Logan Steele, second.
Awesome, thank you. Okay. I'm gonna now take roll call vote. Can I just say people's names and then have them say yay or nay, or do you?
Yeah, you can do that.
You have to say the block this out every meeting.
That's one way to do it.
Either say the full name or you can call them by their first name, but then they have to say their full name. We have to have the full name.
Okay, that sounds good. We'll just go around and say your name and say your vote. Okay, roll call vote. Starting with Joe.
Joe Sullivan, aye.
Logan Steele, aye.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Megan
Valdivia, aye.
To you, Megan.
Hartley, aye.
Haley Lyons, aye. Thank you. Motion passed. Okay, item 3, review of the public board summary. We have them, 2 summaries, February 4th and April 30th presented here. Any comments or corrections related to the board summaries? Seeing none, great. Public comment, good, we got right back on time for public comment. Are there any members of the public who wish to comment? Please raise your hand in the room or use Zoom raise hand feature. If I call on you for comment, you will be permitted to address the board for a maximum of 3 minutes, and staff will unmute you so you can speak. As chair, I reserve the right to end your comment early and have staff mute you if your comment does not pertain to the authority given to this board by the legislature to regulate the CPA profession and public accountancy firms in this state. Any public comments? Nope, great. Okay, report of the OSCPA.
Thank you very much. I will start out with celebratory good things first. So Circle of Excellence was held on the 22nd, the evening. Thank you to the board and Haley Martin for being for the program. It was very, very nice evening in a different location because with a scheduling conflict that needed to be adjusted, we ended up moving to something. So we were at the C-suites in tired. It was quite lovely. So anyway, thank you to everybody. It's always a lovely evening when you see everybody getting their certificates, or they're celebrating those certificates, new licensees, new candidates, the top students, and the member milestones too. And I had a really nice comment from one of the educators that said, it's so nice to have our newer folks in the room where they're celebrating their achievement and they can look and see the transition of their career all the way up to the member milestones that, you know, sometimes folks are up to, I remember a few years back, 64 years of membership. And so anyway, it's that celebratory evening. Coming up to a couple of other things, I've had several really nice comments about, as we know, Senate Bill 797 with all of these changes has been signed by the governor. Had several nice comments, and really a few of those get me a little bit emotional, quite frankly, just because I know they're going to be impactful for those folks for their career. And one of them, it was definitely an affordability issue. I don't know if I can keep doing this. So anyway, when you start to see these moments, thank you to everybody here in the room and others outside, because it's life-changing for some folks. So, and I had, and I'm going to talk quickly, but I had, you know, who is a person that's now a CPA, talk about their experience many years ago, going through a very challenging process and getting certified to quote them, change my life and change my family's life. And that's the really big picture of what has been accomplished. So thank you very much, everybody. And excited about 796, and I hope that we can get through some other things on the floor over the legislature, so we get through that. Looking at a couple of other things, it's CPE season, so we have a lot of programs going on right now. Most of them are online. That's the environment we're working in these days. The other thing too is Megan Curtis and I will be attending NASPA Western Region meeting. We always look forward to being able to do that and setting with the Oregon team and being able to just participate in that and see that big picture and participate. Looking at a couple of other things, thank you for discussing the CPE audit today. I've had several calls, not a lot of calls, but the couple of calls I had were, you know, very serious. So I wanted to thank you for taking a look at that today. And it really, I think it's a season of thank yous, you know, working for everything possible, being able to, OSCPA, and I'm not speaking for Amanda, but OAIA involved in that process of being able to provide feedback is just greatly appreciated. So thank you.
Sure. And you called Amanda, you said Amanda's name, so now she gets a chance to speak. Amanda, report to OAIA.
Thank you so much. At the OAIA right now, kind of the big thing, we have our new website that we're hoping to launch at the next month. We're in this kind of final testing stage, so that's been a long time coming. So we're hopeful that that will go smoothly. We have we're preparing for our CE season coming up in the fall. We have our annual meeting this afternoon where we'll re-elect our new line officers. So we're not expecting any changes, but if there are any, I'll be sure to let you know. And then the other thing is, you know, we're just trying to watch all the pieces of legislation that are moving forward, trying to figure out what and when to communicate things to our members. I'm very excited that we have a final, you know, that we can start talking about 797, which is lovely. You know, we have hopeful that we will soon be able to start talking about 796 and 2338. And then also with the changes in Washington, you know, being able to communicate those big changes in the budget bill that'll be impactful to the Washington, you know, firms with accounting firms with a footprint and clients in Washington. So yeah, we're excited about all those things.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda. Okay. Ready to rock and roll? We're missing. Oh, that's here. So now I'm calling the public session of the Board of Accountancy back to order, June 5th, and the time is 9:34 for the record. There is a change in those attending public sessions, so I'm going to do a new roll call to establish attendance, starting with those present at board office, followed by those. So Haley Lyons, board chair. Martin Piccioni, Executive Director.
Martin Fitzioni, Executive Director.
Mike Mead, CPA and guest.
Joe Sullivan, board member. Logan Steele, board member.
Jason Robinson, board treasurer. Jason Orm, LRC chair.
Jeremiah Leopard.
Jeremiah Leopard, board staff.
Angie Hunt, Board Legal Counsel.
Rob Valdivia, vice chair.
Andy Barlow, board staff. Quinn Stoddard, board staff.
Sherry McPherson, OSCPA guest.
Megan Kurz,
Megan
CPA vice chair and board liaison.
Amanda Fells,
Uh,
a board liaison.
Megan Hartley, board member.
Tanya Moffett, BOAC Chair.
Ray Johnson, member of the LRC.
Awesome, thank you. I believe that is everybody that is on Zoom. So we are at item 8, work session. Update on House Bills 5001 budget bill, licensure path. I want to skip that one actually.
Yeah.
We're gonna move that to below 8. I don't know.
Delay.
We're gonna delay that. And we're gonna move into the discussion of private equity and alternative practice structures. So Martin, can you give us the update on latest developments?
I'll just keep that super brief and simply say that one part that's already been in the public space is that we've seen a shift in since the last board meeting, the last 2 board meetings, from very isolated cases in Oregon and the Pacific Northwest of firms adopting APS structures to what is now becoming a bit of a larger development. I feel like I can publicly say, at least with a big asterisk, that we have nothing in writing, but there has been a public announcement of the Baker Tilly acquisition still in progress of Moss Adams. I have been in touch with the firm. I'm not authorized to speak on behalf of the firm. We have no written submissions by Moss Adams to our office, but it is in general my understanding, based on representations from my contacts at Moss, that Moss does not intend to adopt an APS structure and is instead intending to submit a proposal to us that would keep the firm as one, but with some level of below 51% ownership of PE in the structure post the deal. That is not confirmed. We don't have that in writing, but that is one of the reasons why a lot of the discussions today, whether it's around the AICPA recommendations on the independence rules, whether it's around what we may ask the LRC to do, all of that stuff has rapidly gained in level of importance for us to address it, because this is no longer an outlier issue. So wherever we are, it's no longer an outlier issue. So that's really kind of the latest there. And the other development that you have clearly in your packet is that we did finally see emergence, at least on the AICPA side, of a first set of recommendations coming out of their peak committee around independence rules, updating independence rules in response to these emergence of alternative practice structures. There is a comment deadline back to AICPA of June 15, which is why, with consent of the chair, we asked the LRC to at least attempt to take a look at this pretty voluminous body of work and give us a set of recommendations, or a recommendation as to whether we should comment or not. And I'll just stop there. So that's the 2 big ones that I think the board and our guests need to be aware of with respect to the context in which these discussions need to take place.
Right, so with respect to the AICPA peak exposure draft, Jason, do you want to lead us on a bit of that discussion, and Ray?
Yes, we looked at it as the LRC and came to the conclusion that we're supportive of it. We believe that the board should support it, but it doesn't quite go far enough. We think that the leasing of employees between the non-attest and the attest firm, there just needs to be some strengthening, especially with regard to peer review and some other matters. Ray was good enough to draft some comments for the board, which I believe are in the board packet, are they not? And so we submit those for your consideration as a draft if the board chose to respond. The response deadline is the 16th of this month, so it's upon us.
So that was mailed out yesterday in the last supplement and is in your packets under item I think 8B2.
Megan, I hate to put you on the spot as I'm a former auditor, but as an active auditor, any additional thoughts on kind of the approach here with respect to kind of the independence issues described? Megan H.
Yeah, I mean, nothing came to mind when I was looking at it.
Okay. I wanted to make sure it's like that you have an opportunity if there was anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think the comments were really on point with the issues that are there and that are present with respect to the independence matter. Are we ready for any comments about that? Do we have
I'm just processing one thing, and I'm actually, Jason can help me with this. There is one other thing that we would bring to the board and not point out of the LRC discussion. The issue that was just brought up related to the increased importance of peer review also led to a discussion at the LRC on Tuesday that because we also had, as I think you were there when this happened, we already had at a prior peer review oversight committee meeting, one of the peer review oversight committee members start to ask questions for, hey, what do these developments mean from a perspective of the peer review oversight committee and our functions and peer review side, right? And essentially that led to a discussion at the LRC that we may want to do something a bit out of the norm and do have like a much more direct conversation between the Laws and Rules Committee and the Peer Review Oversight Committee around both rules and kind of what does this mean, both from an LRC side, but also from a Peer Review Oversight Committee side. So obviously that meeting LRC only happened on Tuesday, so I have not had a chance to discuss this with our PROC chair. But I do think the board should be aware that the LRC, which is not formally recommended, but there was a very productive and I think a very supportive discussion of us at the LRC level, connecting directly with the PROC around those issues. Sorry, that's just, I almost forgot about that.
Thank you for mentioning that. I forgot to mention that. Thank you.
I also forgot about it from the PROC side. Yes, I was there. Okay, so any other comments about the LRC recommendation? Or do we have a motion to adopt the LRC recommendation on providing comments to AICPA Peak?
Make a motion to adopt the recommendations by LRC to be.
And your name is?
Jason Robinson.
Thank you.
Logan Steele, I second.
Thank you. We will do any discussion about that. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, we will do a roll call vote.
Okay, Joe Sullivan, aye. Logan Steele, aye.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Rob Valdivia, aye.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Haley Lyons, aye. Thanks, you guys. Appreciate that. Moving on to firm registration requirements. Firm registration requirements.
Yeah. So just to level set this also for the folks that have joined us in public session, very briefly, you have in the public packets materials that were very kindly developed by the folks at NASBA, providing you an overview of firm registration requirements across the country. It's not the easiest document to read. And as much as I'm deeply appreciative for NASBA's help, you really do have to read into the details of the document to capture its full meaning. Because with these categorizations in that document of who is requiring everyone to register and who is, kind of not quite there and just requiring firms in the attest space and some other requirements, my advice is, if you read this, please don't pay too much attention to the X's and where they're placed, and delve into the actual detail. And the reason for that is that there are places where if you read the actual description by NASBA of what that particular jurisdiction requires, it would have led me to a conclusion to place the X in a different spot. Because the reality is that there are jurisdictions that are identified as broadly requiring firms to register. And when I read into the description of what their requirements are, it actually aligns with where most jurisdictions are at, which is requiring attest firms to register. And outside attest, there's certain criteria that have to be met as to whether or not a firm would have to register in a non-attest space, right? So contextually, the data simply shows, and unfortunately, it's a snapshot of now. It's not a historical evolution, right? That effectively, and I don't mean this critically, I'm proud of what we've done and where we've been in Oregon, right? But effectively what it means is that our current approach to really broadly requiring every firm to register it's been a bit of an outlier and become more of an outlier. And quite frankly, one of the things that I personally missed and felt embarrassed by, because I probably have made comments both at this board and at the LRC that in retrospect were inadvertently incorrect, is initially when I came to the board, Washington's firm registration requirements and ours were aligned. That changed when I made my, evil return back into public health space and then came back. Turns out during that time period, Washington aligned with where the majority of other jurisdictions are, right? Which means that we've become actually even more of an outlier right now that we are. Now, implication-wise, right? It doesn't mean that we had it wrong in terms of trying to get firms to register, but it does mean that it's factually accurate that how we're approaching this right now isn't very much in alignment, and that we're going to have to figure out kind of a pathway forward. And if you don't mind, Madam Chair, I think it's just easier to kind of talk about this really in the context of the recommendations that I made. So I kind of tried to, in listening to our past discussions, and really trying to think through the different policy options. Essentially, I put a document out there yesterday, consent, trying to capture essentially 5 recommendations that this board could make, if it chooses to, back to the LRC. One is to basically move closer with the way we approach firm registration to essentially a little bit of a more flexible approach, if you will, to registering firms, either doing the attest service and CPA designations or having explicit permission to exempt certain firms from registration requirements, so that we have essentially a bit more ability to restrict what's coming our way, and effectively what we've discussed in prior meetings with, very CPA specific terms like the cows are out of the barn, right? So we've used that terminology before, and we're going to have to figure that out right? And I do think that we have to update our registration requirements for that reason. Second recommendation is, especially given what we know from, and what I think I've just publicly stated earlier, what we know around the potential developments with Moss, is that we asked the LRC to develop a laws and rules framework, emphasis on laws and rules, for minority ownership of firms that are required to register, updating minority criteria to allow for PD ownership. Third recommendation is ask the LRC, at least at the statutory level, to come back with a proposal for us at the September board meeting. The reason for that timing is, quite frankly, that that's the only way that we could actually get something into the 2026 session and get to some kind of a consensus. That leads to recommendation 4, which is to then, if the board goes down the first road of the first 3 recommendations, is to then ask the LRC to follow that up at the December board meeting with a rules framework that would implement such a legislative proposal. And then kind of to put a little bit of, if you will, icing on the cake and dreams that we've thrown around both at the Laws and Rules Committee level and at the board level is, you may recall that we've had somewhat open and painful discussions around level of comprehensibility or lack thereof in terms of some of our statutory language related to firms. And if there is a way to clean some of that up in the process of accomplishing these policy goals, I would love to at least have the board give the LRC the latitude to try and say, is there something that we can do that would also, as part of us doing that really difficult lift of going to the 26th session, should the board agree to do that, can we add some healing balm, if you will, by also doing something that we've been become really good at doing in our rules, in our statutes, which is, can we simplify some things and make it easier for people to understand how they're being regulated, right? So those are the 5 high-level things. I've given you essentially 4 pages worth of detailed rationales behind that. I don't know if you've had a chance to read it. I think the only thing that I want to just add before just opening up for questions, because I'm happy to go into details here, is I want to be really clear. First of all, these recommendations are coming from me only. I did not discuss them with staff. It's a little bit kind of on the edge of, I'm not trying to tell you what to do. It's simply my best advice on how to thread the needle on a issue that has been really difficult for this board. And it doesn't mean that I haven't also heard the desire and the struggle at the prior board meetings around this issue, which means that I really try to also think through, and that's captured in the document that you have before you. Okay, what if we did something really different, which is essentially what we've discussed, at least at the LRC level, I believe maybe to some extent at a board level, like what would happen if we strictly hung on to requiring all firms to register, including the ones that are going under APS? And is there a practical way for us to actually do that if that's where the board would land, right? And I had to come to the conclusion, I don't even know that there is a practical way to do it, right? And there's the reasons for that I outlined there, and I'll just very high level summarize is, if you look at existing statute right now, right? Existing statute already allows firms that are out of state to service Oregon clients if they operate in a non-attest space, right? So if we were to move toward let's require everybody strictly to register, APS or not, right? The only way we could do that, there's only 2 choices there. One is we do it for Oregon only, right? In which case, effectively, what we're doing is have a very different approach in Oregon than in other places. And we effectively push business out of Oregon and say, you're just going to have to provide those services through an out-of-state firm, right? Because folks are not going to change their stuff just for the Oregon piece. The flip side is, if you want to avoid that scenario, you would have to come in and basically say, after decades of not requiring out-of-state firms to register, we now would, right? Which seems, quite frankly, a really huge ask to ask a community to change course and comply with significant levels of increased registration requirements. I don't know how that would align ultimately with the board's goals of streamlining our stuff. And quite frankly, I don't know that it would align with all the work that we've done with supporting the easy flow of services across state lines, right? So I tried to think through, is there a way for this different policy direction that we've also discussed at LRC level? And I just don't see a practical way to get there. And that's essentially why, after, 6 months ago, I would not have been willing to write this, right? It's been a journey for me, but that's after giving a lot of thoughts to where we at the LRC level, at the board level. That's my advice on at least helping you with an initial policy discussion, right? So whether you agree with it or not, I hope it will at least help the discussion. But it's my best advice on how to thread the needle.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you taking a major stab at it, because it sort of, for me, helped gel what we're, like, we know we have to go a direction, and maybe the direction is not perfectly where we thought we would go 6 months ago, 3 months ago, 2 months ago, yesterday, I don't know. But I do think it's the right direction for the reasons that you listed. And we kind of have been kicking the can down the road, as everyone has, to determine what kind of national guidance might we get. And NASBA is farther behind on this process than I would like as a board member. And but also has been sort of deferring to AICPA, who took the issue up long before, and was like, okay, well, we need to let them kind of finish up some of their work before we try to come in and have sort of overriding, thoughts and suggestions. So I think the time is now for us to just be like, all right, we're going to do our thing and do what we think is best for, our state, and move forward. But also staying in alignment with what our kind of overarching goals have been over the last couple of years with this current legislation. So I thought I put together a really comprehensive direction, and there is no perfect solution. For my 2 cents. Comments, discussion?
Motion.
Yeah, do we need a motion? Are we motioning?
On this one, I absolutely think so.
Okay.
Because this is a really big shift in policy direction. Now, it doesn't tie us to, does the board have to do it, but we don't want to waste the LRC's time.
Right.
By asking it to go down a road that the board wouldn't ultimately, at least
Support.
conceptually support.
Yeah. Yeah.
I make a motion, I, Jason Robinson, make a motion to put forward the recommendation as presented from board staff.
Logan Steele, I second.
Great, thank you. Any further discussion?
One clarification, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Could I interpret that motion to include slightly alternative approaches to the firm registration requirements, including but not limited to asking firms to register, but with specific authority to exempt firms by rule, having statutory authority to provide exemptions in rule?
Yes. I do.
Thank you for putting that together, and Angie too, so very helpful.
Do we need to do anything to capture Martin's asterisk? Or that's just like clarification?
Yeah, I think it's
Great.
clarification.
All right, we'll take a vote. Joe?
Okay. Joe Sullivan, aye.
Logan Seal, aye.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Roll call DBI, aye.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Haley Lyons, aye. Great. Thank you, Jason, for all of your work on that. Thanks, Ray, for that, for your work as well, and looking forward to what's to come.
Yeah, Ray, you were absolutely heroic writing this up right after the LRC with everything else you had going on. Bless you and thank you.
Thank you, Ray.
Okay, so we are now on. Okay, do you want to jump back up to A, or should we move into, we still have E, review and potential adoption of revised rulemaking plan for 2025. Did we just do that?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, there was an additional component that you mentioned. Okay. Okay, let's jump back up to A, update on House Bill 5001, and then you can have that go right into F, the initial consideration of the strategic plan.
Okay, so very briefly, we've had an absolutely hugely successful legislative session so far. We have our main bill was signed by the governor on May 22 and actually beautifully allowed for a moment at OSCPA Circle of Excellence where the leadership there was willing to essentially go off script so we could make literally a live announcement before any social media or anything like that, because literally within an hour of the governor signing the bill, we were able to announce it at the Circle of Excellence, which was for a really, really nice moment there. And so I appreciate OSCPA allowing us to kind of have this totally impromptu diversion at that event. It made it extra special to be able to do that. You can't plan for such moments, but it worked out amazingly well. And quite frankly, we had zero opposition all along the way. This was completely unanimous, not a single no vote. So super grateful for everyone getting this done. This did include a little detour of helping out another small state agency with a last minute one-word amendment at the request of the governor's office, but even that did not cause more than just a little bit of a speed bump in terms of an extra amendment and an extra Senate vote. So it worked out beautifully. With respect to our budget bill and our Board of Accountancy bill, I will say two things. One is we're not done because we're still awaiting the final floor votes that were supposed to have happened last week, but they keep laying it over on the calendar. And it's possible that at some point during this board meeting, I may ask for an interruption to make an announcement because one of those floor votes could happen while we're meeting. So we're super close. I will also say that you should all step back and congratulate yourselves. I have never, ever in my entire time as doing this work for agencies like ours, gotten as much attention, positive attention, and legislative excitement, including up to not just the committees working our stuff, but to the leadership of Ways and Means around the work that we've been doing on the accountancy scholarship bill and the associated funding package in our budget bill. Never seen anything like it. Stuff that should have happened quickly didn't. Why? Because they couldn't stop congratulating themselves and asking questions about how we pulled that off, to the point where our work came up in other budget hearings of other licensing boards, asking them what they're doing to reinvest in their pipeline. Right? So this got a lot of excitement and a lot of attention. So you should feel really, really good and really proud. We're almost done and almost there for what I would simply call the legislative equivalent of in baseball terms, all bases loaded home run. So there we are. And there's 3 bases. We have 3 bills. I think the analogy works. So well, I mean, there's 3 bases outside of home base, whatever. I should probably stop there, right? Before I muck it up with my soccer background.
Yeah.
So there we are.
Is it okay to say something celebratory?
Yes.
Thank you. So when we were at AICPA Council, which was that week prior to the 22nd Circle of Excellence. We were sitting there at the Reagan table, and I have to say, we got to be very distracted because that's when the floor vote and everything was happening. So for that to happen while we're sitting in a group, and then for a Circle of Excellence, where that happened with the governor, I'm just like very excited today. I would like 3 times the charm, right? It would be so exciting for us to find out that all of this happened today. The amount of excitement from everybody, but it's just like to be together with folks in these successes, not out there. It was like very an odd coincidence, but very lovely.
Yeah.
And it was really nice from the stage at Circle, you know, so. Very nice.
Yeah,
Thank you, Haley and Martin.
And Haley put a wonderful, kind of wonderful idea with a slight twinge of crazy into my head that I followed up on before I thought about it too much, which has now resulted in the governor's office not making a commitment, but it's thinking about whether they would do some kind of a signing ceremony for our accountancy scholarship bill at some point, right? It won't be the official signing because
So we can.
So we'll see if that happens, but we'll let you know if there is actually something in the governor's office that happens, which is another testament of budget dust agencies like us do not get bill signing ceremonies in the governor's office. It just doesn't happen. This might just be the one time where it does. So that's my report there. You're asking me to skip E and go straight into F.
Did we do E?
We didn't do E.
Oh, that's what I was asking about earlier. Sorry.
We didn't do E, but I'm
Okay,
happy to
great.
jump into
Let's
the
do E.
wave, unless there's questions on the legislative side.
Seeing none.
Okay. Rulemaking plan. This, you might be forgiven if you say, Martin, is this the board equivalent of Groundhog Day? Didn't we just see this document at the last April 30th board meeting? And why is it back? Are you wasting our time? All of which would be very legitimate questions. And the truth is, yes, we did miss something. Because it turns out that the initial iteration of our plan that we brought to the LRC and the board had a flaw that fortunately council caught, which is that what we were proposing wasn't fully aligned with our legislative authority because it proposed us voting to expose rules on Senate Bill 797 and essentially exposing them before the bill's effective date. And it turns out we don't have the option to do that. So in response to that, I rewrote this document. There's upsides and downsides to what just happened here, right? The downside first, right? Effectively means we are not permitted, the way Senate Bill 797 is written, to file rules to implement that bill with the Secretary of State before 1 second after midnight when the clock turns to January 1, 2026. What that means is we will not be able to go through the formal part of the rulemaking process starting January 1, 2026, although we are able at the December board meeting that we have scheduled to vote on a rules package implementing that bill, but we will not be allowed to expose it until January 1. And there are 2 consequences. One is it means that for hopefully as short a time period as possible, what we have in rule, particularly on the licensing side, will not align fully with what is in statute come January 1. We need to keep that time period to as short a period of time as in any way possible, which is also why you have a separate ask on the agenda. This is all interconnected. A separate ask on the agenda to consider holding our first board meeting in January of next year on January 29th which would allow us to slightly earlier than our normal, more like early February-ish schedule. But that would allow us to actually get to the closest possible formal rules piece, because it would allow us to do a rulemaking hearing after 21 days after we file with the Secretary of State, which is one of the key criteria. We could do that at the board meeting, do a rule adoption, and get to a February 1 implementation date. So the downside is we have that awkward month during which at least the license, at minimum, the licenses under the new pathways would not be issued until the rules are in place. So there will be like a 30-day gap under that plan. But that's essentially what that proposal is, to minimize the pain. Now let's switch from pain to gain. What do we gain by this? There's actually some pretty cool things that happen as a result of council pointing this out. One is, and we discussed this at the LRC, so Jason, please feel free to jump in. It allows us to do a flyby by the LRC at the September board meeting and say, this is how far we've come with respect to rules development to implement 797. Are we on the right track? What are we missing? Here are the policy choices. Maybe there is an ask for additional direction on a particular issue. We should know a lot more over the summer in terms of where Washington is going, where California is going, and the LRC will have, we're not subsumed with the other work we just authorized the LRC to do a few minutes ago. We'll have plenty of opportunity to look at other states and see what they're doing, come back in September without the pressure of having a finalized rules document, taking that feedback, finalizing it, and bring us a developed package in December. So that's essentially what this plan does. It is in part a response to council catching, hey, we can't quite do it the way that we brought it to you first, right? There are the downsides that I mentioned, but there's also some real upsides, including one other piece. Keep in mind that we cannot do town halls during the formal exposition of rules, right? Because there's very strict limits on how we're allowed to take comment on when rules are exposed. So the fact that we are going to try to make that formal period to as short a time period as possible and have longer to develop our rules also dramatically expands our ability to work with higher ed, students, other partners as part in doing town halls, not just in the summer, but maybe in the fall when people are paying a little bit more attention, right? So that's also another upside in all of this. But that's why you have this here, and I do apologize that we didn't catch this earlier, because in an ideal world, all of that should have been before you on April 30th already, and that one we missed.
So we need a motion.
Please.
Sure.
I, Jason Robinson, make a motion to put forward the strategic plan as presented.
This is the rulemaking.
The rulemaking plan as presented.
Hold that thought for
Sorry.
5 more seconds.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Logan Seal, I second.
Any discussion? Great. Take a vote.
Yeah. Joe Sullivan, aye. Logan Seal, aye.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Ronald Bibia, aye.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Haley Lyons, aye. Great. Okay. Martin's gonna keep this very brief.
Yes, I will, because this is also, I love this term that Haley taught me. That's the term flyby. So this is another flyby. So I'm trying to thread the needle here between a governor's office requirement that on June 1, agencies that were previously exempted from having a separate IT strategic plan were required to integrate specific IT goals into their strategic plan by June. Now, there's always a little bit of leverage here around board, the agencies that have board oversight, they know that we can't just do this at the staff level, we need to actually bring stuff to you. And I kind of got caught here between things. One is, this was not the right board meeting in the right timing where we had anticipated doing like a whole bunch of work on strategic planning again. And at the same time, I got really stuck just updating the strategic plan goals in our document. It just felt really off to kind of bring back something that had language that was clearly in need of updating outside of IT. So essentially what I did was, I wrote up my best guess of what I would bring to the board, most likely pending your direction in September, and say, okay, now that we're through the session, have all this stuff done, a little bit more of a breather and so on, what does the board think about various updates to the strategic plan? So part of this is almost like essentially what you have in front of you is an early look. At that piece, there is no need for us, unless you want us to get into any of the details here. If you have feedback on, oh, hey, we're missing this, we're missing that, that's of course great. But mostly what I need to be able to do as the actual minimum outcome goal from today is, I was required in that document, there is a section that has a whole bunch of specific implementations around IT. I had a meeting with DAS, EIS, and Jason. I always forget what that stands for. Do you remember? It's essentially IT. It's a version of IT oversight, but I can never remember what the acronym, like Enterprise Information Services or Information Security or
changing their acronym.
Yeah.
Information system.
Anyway, so it's DAS EIS is the formal part of DAS that essentially knocked on our door saying, you need to spruce, basically in a nice way, saying you need to spruce this up. So I did actually give this to them. What you have in front of you actually has the blessing of that DAS agency. I did run this by them, right? So really it's the IT section that's in there where I would need to, in ideal, will be able to say, hey, on June 5, the board took a preliminary look at this and is on board with integrating these IT goals into a strategic plan update that will not be completed until a future board meeting. And then I can thread the needle between doing what I need to do on the IT side now without forcing us into a whole strategic plan. Let's go through all the things and have a strategic plan discussion now moment. That's essentially what I'm trying to do here in terms of threading the needles between the ever increasing amount of governor's expectations with specific deadlines of what all agencies have to do and being realistic about, you know, what we can do at any one of our given quarterly board meetings.
There's a lot of dates that are coming up really quickly in this. The only thing I'm asking is are you putting yourself up against a pressure point that you could expand upon? Or do you guys think you're going to meet each one of these goals? Is all I'm asking.
Yeah. Short answer is yes. There's actually a bit of stuff in here, and I'm actually really glad you asked this question. So first of all, bureaucrat that I can be, I have learned the value of putting in goals that are already almost nearly accomplished to ensure that there are things that we can celebrate.
Okay.
There is also, but aside from just being compliant, okay, first of all, a lot of credit goes to the gentleman sitting behind me, because he's actually been the one who's suffering the most around making things happen. And you've probably noticed around renewals that we have a renewal season with different options for licensure renewal. There's a lot of stuff that's happened here, right? That effectively reflects work that in part is already done or 80 to 90% done on this piece, right? But it also reflects something very serious. I still have the chills in my bones from my initial time in August of 2012, coming to this board after my then predecessor was terminated because of a failed IT project and essentially being less than transparent to the point of dishonest with the board, our licensees, Oregonian, you name it, it was all there, right? Around making promises around IT and best renewal thing ever, all of which crashed very publicly. And so I'm super burnt from that history, even though it wasn't my history. There is a reason why I didn't come to this board and say, we will pull this off by X period of time for this renewals. I didn't know that we could. I would much rather come to this board meeting and say, hey, we were able to pull this off and it's already done. Right? Because then at least I know I'm not promising something that I can't keep, because the gentleman behind me has been working his rear end off to make these things happen, right? But it also means that I'm super careful about not putting things out there that I can't keep, although there are some on the strategic plan that I didn't, right? So just to give you one example, outside of IT, you may recall that I originally thought that I could give you a community engagement plan by, I forget the exact time, but that was almost like a year ago, right? And that hasn't happened, right? So I do have my moments where I get a little bit ahead of myself, but now instead we have a staffing structure that allows me to do community engagement, which is far better than giving you a plan, right? So now we are adjusting on that front, but it's a very fair question, Jason, and yes, I do feel comfortable.
Okay.
Great, other comments on that? We do not need a motion on this, right?
I don't need a motion. I just need to make sure that there isn't anybody here that is uncomfortable with what's there on the IT side of the equation.
No.
Great.
Thank you.
I'd like to propose a short break. 5 to 6 minutes, starting now. 45 to 36 seconds.
Stop recording.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we are calling I am calling the public session of the Board of Accountancy back to order. June 5th at 10:32 a.m. The same persons previously present in public session are still present, so no need to conduct a new roll call. Okay, we are on to new business. And I'm going to scroll up to that at some point. There we go. So Martin, policy this direction to you regarding exam extension requests beyond June 30.
So I want to start this off with an apology that we don't have something in the packet. I ran out of steam. So I need to set the context for the direction request here. And I also don't come to you with a specific recommendation, which will become clear in a moment why. So let me do the level set here for a minute, right? All of you, to various degrees of detail, are aware that the profession has gone through an enormous amount of activity, changing the framework for how long people have to pass various sections of the CPA exam. That includes, but is not limited to, 2 major extensions that have happened around the country, including in Oregon, around either what we called the Credit Relief Initiative, which was about essentially restoring expired CPA exam credits that expired during the declared public health emergency, and extending them to June 30th of this year, so just 3 weeks from now. Right, there was a separate wholesale extension also to June 30th, 2025. That happened simply because of the transition to the new CPA exam called CPA Evolution, which basically simply meant that any jurisdiction that had a valid, that had candidates with a credit that was valid on December 31 of, I think it was 2023, if I remember correctly, because the exam went into place, I think in 24, on January 1, 24, were also automatically extended to June 30th, 2025, right? So we've had essentially, and this is the part where we're still talking national picture, including Oregon, right? We've had this really exciting piece where a lot of people are working really hard, courtesy of those extensions, to try to get through the remaining journey in their CPA exam and getting a little bit of wind of their back, under their wings, if you will, by having certain sections restored that they didn't think they were going to have, right? Now, the picture is starting to shift a little bit, right? So I'm going to talk first of all about one thing that we did in Oregon that is a little bit different than in other states, right? We were inside that overall picture that was true for the whole country. In Oregon, we also distinguished ourselves of making sure that these various extensions were done as candidate friendly as possible, meaning no need to run to the board, no need to apply. All of this stuff was done with full automaticity. We did all this stuff with NASPA on the back. Nobody had to knock on our door. The only people that knocked on our door were the ones that either couldn't navigate the system or didn't understand the rule or needed some level of assistance navigating stuff. But there was no one who had to go through the process to get the outcomes that the board said, right? You may also recall, when this is the part where the national picture starts to shift a little bit, right? Almost all jurisdictions were unified in something else that happened, which is that we extended the window to pass the exam from 18 months to all the sections of the CPA exam from 18 months to 30. The part that we did, again, more candidate friendly and differently in Oregon is that while we aligned with the 18 to 30, that we were one of the jurisdictions, and there's not very many of those that said we are doing that also on a retroactive basis, because there were also jurisdictions who said that 30-month time window only applies to sections passed after the rule went into effect. We did not do that, right? So we have a lot of that to feel good about. Now, why is this asked on your agenda, right? But the context here is important, right? What is now happening is the predictable effect, right? A lot of people are really using this opportunity, so good news first, to really, really try to get done with their CPA exams, right? Which is the exciting part. That was the policy intent, right? Quite a few of them are having exams scheduled, literally, I'm getting calls now from folks having exams scheduled in June 17, June 20, June 25, right? Their last shot at getting all, and now we're already getting calls. In fact, I was on my way home last night and I had just gotten an email from a gentleman at Moss Adams who was asking for an extension. And this was a relatively typical call, right? Because people are asking for an extension out of fear that they either won't pass the next section or out of fear that the score release date, if that's after June 30th, will impact them negatively, right? And I remind them, no, you're still fine. But essentially what I know is we will have, because we have this bulk of students that are literally pushing things to the very last end, right? Some of them will not pass, which means that I will face a one-time opportunity or challenge, depending on your perspective, where I will get far more requests than normal saying, oops, I didn't quite make it. Can you grant me a 6 months extension? I am so close, right? Now, in our history, I have this delegated authority from the board for 6 months extensions, right? Most of the time when I use it, it is really about medical issues, family things that are going on that I'm responding to that. But I now know that there is absolutely no questions based on the calls that I'm getting, that I will simply start getting a lot more calls and requests by folks who didn't quite make it, who have 3 exams that they passed and they just want that shot at that last exam, but it puts us in conflict with the 30-month deal. One other piece of context. I can't remember whether that already happened prior to the April 30th brief board meeting that we had, but sometime in the last 4 or 5 months, there was a jurisdiction, which out of courtesy, I will not name in public, that decided to do a wholesale extension of all their exam credits from June 30th to December 31st of this year. And the reaction was very swift. People were really upset, right? Because folks had worked really hard to try to have like one unified approach across the country to what we were doing with respect to length of exam windows, right? And here you had a jurisdiction that was literally just kind of doing stuff on their own. Nobody saw this coming. This was announced after the fact. Everybody was kind of blindsided by this, right? But that's also out there. And then one third and last piece, right? You may recall when we worked through all of this stuff that we have a really interesting neighbor to the north, right? So 2 things about Washington, right? Which we cannot fully ignore because they're literally right to our north. They were, I think, the only jurisdiction, there might be another one, but don't quote me on that, that didn't align with the 30-month window and provided 36. They also are the jurisdiction, very much unlike Oregon, that has a strict, you cannot approach the Washington board with any request for an extension of a credit ever. They just don't do it. They have a strict no-go policy.
So they extended 6 months further, but yet they have.
They provide a longer window, but if you have anything that you need, like as a special case, Washington has a strict, we're not going to waste the board's time on individual extension requests, not at the staff level, not at the board level, just don't do it. Right? Which is, I'm not going to sit in judgment of another board. They have a right to set their policy decisions just the way we do.
Yeah.
Right? But it does make for kind of an interesting environment in which I'm now basically asking for direction. Right? Because I don't want to hide from the board. I want to be transparent. That I know that I'm walking into July and August and an inevitable set of requests for folks that didn't quite make it. Right now, I still have the luxury of saying, hey, you don't need to make an extension request. You're still sitting for that section. Don't assume that you're going to fail. You're going to walk in there with a positive attitude and you're going to pass this one. And don't worry about when the scores get released, because score release dates are irrelevant under our current rules, right? As long as you pass it before June 30th, you're good. Just focus on passing. Don't call me right now, right? Don't make a request. I have that luxury right now. That luxury will go away in July and August when at least a certain subset of those folks get notices that they didn't make their last attempt, right? And so that's why I'm asking for any thoughts, direction, guidance from the board on how to handle that delegated authority that I have in that context. And I'm sorry for a little bit of the longer explanation, but I do believe this is one of those times where context matters.
Yeah, sure.
I have a question, just as from the side. Basically with our 30 months coming forward, Washington's setting 36 months, so there's 6 more months. Possibility of candidates deciding to go to Washington to apply.
Some might.
I'm just thinking about that bigger picture. I don't know how you can get there in the past.
Yeah. It's a double-edged sword. It could happen, right? But the board has also been pretty consistent on emphasizing policy versus having essentially the impact of someone going this, that, or the other way, or fiscal issues not driving the policy, but it's like the focus of the board here has historically been what's the right thing to do.
And please know, I'm not trying to
Yeah,
connect it to policy.
yeah, but no,
Yeah.
your point is well taken. There may be some that will say, I'm just gonna go to the longer window people that are sitting to the north that are an outlier, right? Which puts us in a little bit of a more awkward position.
I think that's okay.
A few questions. So how often does accountancy rules change? And how often does the testing criteria change? And why do we have a hard deadline on you? You take the first exam, and if you don't pass your last one by this time, you can't be a good CPA.
Meaning, why do we have an exam window at all?
Yeah. Because I don't know I don't think I've ever seen something on the board come to the board because they did something wrong, because they're one of those candidates that barely passed the CPA exam, or that they barely met the window of opportunity.
I'm gonna guess it's probably more of a, like, it was like a time frame of like not having these authority to set things open for forever and to try and like,
Well,
Put some kind of window on it.
yeah.
I think there's a couple of things here, right? So first of all, full disclosure, your thought process, you have company. There's actually a bill out there, I don't know where they actually made it all the way through, where somebody got pretty upset with one of our colleague agencies, and that somebody was a legislator, and basically pulled a bill through, or at least tried to pull a bill through, I don't know if it was successful or not, that basically prohibited that agency from having any kind of a timing on. If you pass the exam, you pass the exam, and it shouldn't matter how long it takes you. Right? There are folks out there that are already kind of on that wave, right? And there is more pushback across the regulatory enterprise around exam windows, period. So if you step outside accountancy and just look at where people are at, you're actually not alone in that. You're not alone in that thought process.
I mean, the exam is updated every year for new laws, right? So all that stuff. And so there is some component of like,
Yeah, are you out of sync with
But the full professional analysis, what do they call it? There's a specific term that they use, like the analysis of what happens in the profession and what's changed in the profession.
Mhm.
How do we need to update the exam? There's a specific term that is used for that I used to know, but I'm blanking on right now. That happens about once every 10 years.
CPA evolution type things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity,
Every 10 years.
of the CPAs in this room, who thinks they can pass the exam right now? Because we're all up to date. Right,
Yeah, I got
one,
like 76.
I'm not raising my hand. I'm not raising my hand to say yes to that, Madam Chair, may I say something? Yes, in the past 18 months, as I've seen more data, and we have a professional educator in the room virtually. Does it seem odd to anyone else that the average pass rate for an exam is 40%?
Mhm.
That's the pass rate. Pass
Yeah.
is 40%. Why is that? Why is it so low? And if a professional educator had that same experience, would they look at the exam and say, wait a minute, is this doing what's right? And in fact, it's lower medical profession boards, which are certainly comprehensive and challenging. Pass rates much higher. And I know I with that question, I'm opening a much larger discussion of the can of worms, but it goes to this same question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Sorry.
No, please.
And it's one that we have talked about at the NAVA level as well, and particularly the drop off currently in the exam pass rates. And the question about whether there's alignment between what is being taught in the programs and what's actually being tested. And kind of all of those pieces. And of course, we have a new exam and don't have quite, I mean, it's what, 5 quarters worth of data at this point, and is that enough? And then there have been states that have lowered when, you know, candidates can sit for the exam, and is that playing a role? And I think we would all say no, because of $30 credits, blah, 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 blah. But there are several factors right now. Historically, the pass rates have been what seem always are like, what? But it's definitely a hot topic at the national level. And I will say that I get to be on the AICPA state board committee. That's a subcommittee of the Board of Examiners. So maybe I'll have more information soon about what that is. Because it's one of those things that always strikes me as like, what is the right number?
I don't know whether you intended this or not, Jason, but I could slightly facetiously say this is your revenge for Haley running such an efficient board meeting up until now, because it actually is by far one of the hottest topics amongst my colleagues.
Yes.
People have been railing on this issue for well over a decade. There's significant differences of opinion. There is, and I don't know if Ray is willing to weigh in on that, but I have heard out of the education community. I have heard out of representatives from the education community concerns about the passage rate from the perspective of disconnect around what's on the exam versus what's being taught, and lack of communication allegedly between the education community feedback on the last version of the CPA exam and the content of the CPA exam. There's all kinds of stuff there. But also, quite frankly, I have colleagues who have been very vocal about why is it that we are talking about having such an issue in our pipeline, and wouldn't one of our potential responses at the national level be to say, is our exam too strict? Should we have, for example, drop the grading requirement? For example, go from a 75 to a 70. For example, right? There's all kinds of really heated discussion behind the scenes of what the right thing to do here is. I personally don't feel qualified to have a real opinion on what the right thing to do here is, but I can absolutely assure you this is a super hot, loaded topic.
Yeah, I'd love to have Ray and Logan just weigh in briefly if you don't mind. Yeah, Ray, go for it.
Yeah, I get it. It's a super hot topic. And at the same time, I would tell you, I sit on the exam review board, which kind of has oversight over some of this process. As part of CPA Evolution, I sat in on 2 of the meetings where the AICPA brought in subject matter experts that supervise entry-level CPAs, trying to figure out, the difficulty of questions and, how you draw that line at 75. And it was a very objective process. Watching the process gave me some real sense of understanding, and felt that this process was led by an outside expert with a lot of accounting practitioners in the room from all sizes of firms. I think how they draw that cut score is a pretty fair and objective process. And I think the Board of Examiners spends even more time than the ERB spent looking at this. But I would tell you, I was impressed by the objectivity of the process and the people that were brought in to try and deal with that. I think it's a separate question on how we communicate with educators, but I would tell you the exam review board has been very transparent in the process of putting out CPA exam blueprints, as well as they've been pretty good about sharing past as they retire questions, sharing questions with CPA exam review providers and others in the public space. So I don't know, it's not an easy question, but the more I've looked at the question, I'm certainly am impressed with the objectivity of the process, which I think is something that I think the profession needs to be concerned about. It's a different question of saying, should we lower the pass rate or the passing score from 75 to 70? That's a different question, but I think the process is, as it's being carried out now, the Board of Examiners and my role on the exam review board, I have been impressed with the objectivity of the way things are carried out. And I would compliment the ERB. You know, it's pretty easy to go look at that CPA exam blueprint and see, all right, this is what's going to be tested in what proportions. These are the topics. If you're going to prepare yourself, you need to be looking at that blueprint.
Thanks, Ray. Morgan, do you have comments?
This is a challenging setting, right? Because it takes us a while to react to, as an educator, to a new CPA exam, matter of years, usually. And then the students don't actually take it for like 7 more years on average. So like we need to know 10 years ahead of time, usually, to be able to like actually react. So if they just give us 10 years, it'd be fine.
Right.
But that's not a total digression, because that attaches to, your knowledge deteriorates over time, right? And you take a CPA exam section, 5 years ago, right? You haven't really started your CPE clock yet, right? So you don't start your CPE clock until you become a CPA. And so that can create a gap, I think, if we get too far into allowing a delay. And for any reason to have the rule, I think that's prominent to me, is that deterioration. Otherwise, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
That's my thoughts.
Sorry for the questions, but great
yes.
question, Jason. Let's kind of reel it back in. You're asking for, is it okay to continue with 6-month extension?
Pretty much, right? Do you want me to take a stricter approach, saying only do that if there is, kind of go back to the more historical? I have been giving them, particularly in situations around medical reasons, family disturbances, and whatever it is, but I haven't just been handing them out like candy.
I think it should be a written request.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
I think it should be a written request.
So,
I think, I don't complicating it with it has to be either a medical issue or blah, 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 or life, whatever. Then you're just giving the reasons that they have to make a good excuse.
Yeah.
So I think it has to be a written request, and just leave it at that.
Well, but does he have the authority to then grant the approval?
I would say yes. I think that needs to come to the board.
I think the delegated authority document is pretty broad.
Yeah.
That we have. I don't have that immediately in front of me, but I don't know if you can look that up, Angie, really quick, what we have under the original delegated authority. But quite frankly, regardless of what's in there, I feel like there's a real need for transparency around how I'm going to handle this issue, right? Because I recognize delegated authority means this is not me being king. It means I'm acting on behalf of the board. I want to make sure that whatever I do is in line with what the board would want me to do.
So the board has approved and supports a 30-month window.
Is that all it says right now? Okay.
Well, I don't know. I mean, isn't that that's what's coming to be?
I don't think it has a date from the delegated authority.
And so as far as, people they're not running up against the 30 months right now, are they? So the June people.
No, this is
still under the 18-month.
This is essentially saying this score is expiring now. Can I get another? And some of them might be at some point up against the 40 months, but right now it's just an issue of, do you want to extend further? I don't think it's actually beyond the 30 months.
Well, I mean, to me, that's the
Right
issue.
now,
It's like, if people are currently
That's actually
tested,
a really good
we
point.
just, like, if they're getting it within the 30 months, that's great. You have the authority to approve all you want. It's people that are feeling like their stuff is gonna expire because it's not in place yet, the 30 months. Well, to me, they're grandfathered in my view.
Okay.
I don't know if everybody agrees with that, but
Yeah, I would agree.
that's my
Yep.
thought. And so I think your authority to extend people to that same 30-month window is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, we should already be there, but yeah, so
Okay.
that's a really clear one. Is
Yeah.
that if essentially we're bumping, somebody hasn't gotten the full 30 months for whatever set of reasons.
Then they can
that's
go to
clear.
Washington.
That would be your response. You have an opportunity just north of us.
Then go back.
Well, yeah, those folks are already grandfathered in, right?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
thought that we had already done that. so,
Okay, so then what do we need? So this is for people that need to go beyond 30 months?
Yeah.
Well,
That's really specific.
I mean, when do we say like, okay, your 30 months is up, I'm sorry, you have 30 months?
So I think we follow Washington's thing and give them the 6-month discretion.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. Yeah, 6 months discretion.
And anything beyond that can be us.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
I think that's great. Good luck on the math on all that.
But we're doing that on a person by person basis. They send something in writing. We're not doing some
As
blank.
opposed to a generic.
Yeah.
like, we're
I
going
have a
to-
guy who's been trying to pass the exam for 5 years and he has been so diligent. I don't even know how many times he's taken it. So he might send you a request for an extension. He's had such a tough.
I'll follow up with, well, yeah.
Sometimes people need to spread their wings in other directions.
You know what, though? He's one of our best guys and now
I
one of
know,
the
I get that.
highest paid
Yeah.
seniors, because by the time he passes it, he'll be like a senior manager. He'll like jump titles because we won't make someone a manager if they haven't passed the exam. Yeah, it's great. But we love the guy, but man, he has struggled to pass the exam.
We have one of those too, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so, we need a motion to continue to allow Martin to expand to 6 months of extension on the
On a
exam
person-
request on a
person by
person by
person.
person basis.
With the written request.
Yeah,
Say
and-
that,
and-
say
and
that,
I never
say that
do
goodly.
anything
Say
without
that-
written.
say that correctly.
I, Jason Robinson, make a motion to continuing allow the executive director to allow extensions past the 30 months in regard to passing the CPA exam
On a person by person.
on a person-by-person basis and with a written request.
Great. Do I have a second?
Before I second, do we want to add, as long as it's less than 3 years? Because weren't we just saying that if it's more than 3 years, it can come to us?
More than 30.
Or 36, yeah.
More than
6
36.
months
Or
extension.
36 months.
Yes, for 36 months max.
But yeah, with requests that are more than 36 months to the board.
Yes.
Logan Sealy, second.
Further discussion? Yeah, let's take a vote.
Jeff Sullivan, aye.
Logan Sealy.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Rob Valdivia, aye.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Haley Lyons, aye. Great, that was 9A.
Yeah, so thank you for actually a really valuable and helpful discussion. I will try to compensate. This next item hopefully is much easier and much faster. There's both a policy decision here and a connection to a laws and rules committee connected action. So with respect to what's coming next, I approached Haley a few weeks ago, I think, with a request that based on feedback that we had gotten from the community here around our CPE audits, which you may recall the board authorized, unlike other services like the wall certificates, us shifting our exam candidate processing to NASBA, which the board originally authorized on a permanent basis. The use of the NASBA CPE audit service was not authorized by the board on a permanent basis, but on a trial basis. And basically said, hey, you can do this, Martin, for 2 seasons. And then you need to circle back to the board and say, do we want to continue this or do we want to do something different, right? On a rules basis, just to be really clear, on a rules basis, because of the technicality of how rule writing works, we couldn't reflect the temporariness in our rules, per se, right? So we updated our rules on a permanent basis to use the NASPA CPE audit service, right? What you have in front of you today is a policy issue and then a rules recommendation to essentially revert that function back to the staff level. And this is one out of two rule recommendations that you will see today. One is on the audit service. The other one we're going to discuss right after that, coming from the pipeline committee around implementing Senate Bill 796. So the issue here is that essentially NASBA CPE audit service is a tool, and it's a very important distinction here. The NASBA CPE audit service is a tool any CPA can access for free if they want to. It is part of, we pay a membership fee to NASBA like all jurisdictions do, and it's a built-in benefit that for those that want to use that service, they can. That changes if there is an audit. So under our rules, our existing rules with that temporary structure, that option to use the NASBA CPE audit service becomes a requirement if you're selected for audit. If you're selected for audit right now under current rules, you must upload, and really uploading means unfortunately not uploading your certificates, but basically establishing a login, establishing a profile. And Jason, you've been willing to be very public at the Laws and Rules Committee about your own most recent experience of having been randomly selected as an auditee. Do you want to explain what it was like to do data entry? It's probably good to have a live example here at the board level from someone who's actually been through it, as opposed to someone who can talk about it indirectly. What was it like?
It is line item by line item by line item by line item, uploading each certificate individually. I generally attend large conferences, and so I didn't have a lot of certificates to do. The entire process took me approximately 2 hours, including getting logged into their website and everything else. As I concluded it, my thought was, I am so grateful I am not doing nano learning. Because it would be and I was cutting and pasting from, we keep everything in an Excel spreadsheet. So I cut, paste, this many hours and this, and then you have to select the area of education, and they're a little bit different. And it was challenging. Mr. Pidioni said that I was randomly selected, which likely I was. I figured I'd just done something wrong in an LRC meeting. I figured we couldn't say that publicly in the room, but so I've been audited before, I think twice or three times. And before it was great because I put all the CPE certificates into a PDF. I sent them off to board staff and I was done. And it took 10 minutes. So the change that is being recommended would simplify things for the Oregon licensees.
Yeah, so simply put, when I realized from that feedback that effectively by using the service, you're asking licensees to spend more likely, because you're an outlier example in terms of attending large conferences, right? So effectively what it means is I'm looking at this board, the way it approaches regulation, saying effectively by using the service, we're asking folks to spend 3 or 4 hours to go through an audit service. And I was like, no, we cannot do that. No offense to NASBA, but that's just not.
Well, kind of offense to NASBA. It's not a great service.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And from my standpoint, I can't remember who I called. I think I called Quinn, who stepped out of the room. But I got the initial thing by email, and we are trained to be very suspect of email with any link that says that was unknown to me. I'm going, what is this? And I let it sit for a bit. And then I actually got a letter. Oh, okay, all right. And then I still wasn't satisfied and I called Quinn. And said, is this a real deal? I think I called Quinn, I left Andrew.
Yeah.
And he said, well, let me check with, and he did. And he said, yep, it's a real deal. So it adds for some confusion among at least one licensee. It added for some confusion.
I was tempted to ask if Quinn was nice to you, but now he's back in the room, so.
Yeah, he was super nice.
To add some feedback, one of the calls that I received was from someone that had entered theirs and they were 2 hours into the process. Something glitched in the process, so they had to go back and start all over again, so it took them over 4 hours. They also said that they had questions in the process, and again, I'm just repeating, right? I didn't see it myself or experience it myself. But they said that there was no way to contact, like there was no contact information. So they couldn't reach out to NASBA to get some help or assistance or either their way through. That's why they had to start over again. So, they had asked that the society advocate to the board, on their behalf because they were disturbed.
Yeah.
So,
So-
that was one example.
And have we thought through we have capacity here?
Yeah, well, we are in a much different place than what we were.
Just want to make sure that, because it sounds like a no-brainer outside of the fact that we have
Yeah, there was a time
the
period.
capacity here to do that without
It
overloading.
is a
the team.
no-brainer because it is a kind of a gentle process. And even though in some ways it is us then taking on the process, but we can take it on our way, which means we don't have to create a database. We don't have to hand enter. We can just look at the certificates of completion and say, are you good? And are you not good? We don't have to make it complicated.
Yeah.
Right. And the reality is our staff is already involved right now because a lot of the calls of people getting frustrated were coming to us anyway.
Okay.
Right. So it really is not the game that we had hoped it would be. I was nice to NASBA and said, look, I appreciate the fact that they played a critical role in helping us recover from our staffing pieces. That is still true, right? But this particular piece just doesn't meet our needs anymore, right? And that's why, and quite frankly, there's a timing issue here. Unless we get that into the roles we're asking the board to expose today and wait for that larger package that we've started discussing here around the LRC, then effectively we wouldn't be able to pull this back to the staff level until after tax season next year. And what I'm asking here is not just a change in policy direction, but an opportunity through that separate action of authorizing rulemaking about this. It gives us a shot of having that authority to do it at the staff level in place by October 1, which means that this fall we could play catch up, because right now we're still way behind, right? We used NASBA to do the 22 renewals and the 23 renewals, right? We will catch up to the 24 renewals and the 25 renewals, because best practice is that when you lapse after renewal season, which is August 29th, that you then in September or October of that year saying, hey, we just completed this renewal season, you were selected for audit. And that we need a shot to return to that best practice and catch up with ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's the further context here.
Great.
And Andrew is eager.
Yes.
Tremendously. Thank you, Andrew.
Can you try to tell how excited he is?
Yeah.
Okay, do we have a motion to return CPE audits to the BOA staff and in the use of NASBA space?
I just Robinson make a motion as moved.
As stated.
As stated.
Logan Steele, I second.
Thank you. Further discussion? None. Let's take a vote.
Yeah, Joe Sullivan, aye.
Logan Steele, aye.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Rob LDI.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Haley Lyons, aye. Thank you. My Or wordsmithness swearing off on your Jason. All right, 9C, consideration of
Did we do the rulemaking?
No, that's what we're.
consideration of LRC recommendations for phase one rules.
So this is effectively the tagging on to the motion just now. What you have in your packets is a very simple, I think, 4 or 5 word change in the section of our CPE rules that essentially deletes the reference to the NASPA CPE audit service and would effectively authorize us to do this at the staff level. So this particular motion is to actually do the rulemaking to effect what you just voted on. So ideally, we would ask for a motion under 9C, Jason, which is essentially what the LRC discussed and recommended. So I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but I think we had a clear, Jason, we had a clear discussion at the LRC and a recommendation of the language that's in your packet. And so essentially, I think we could simply do a motion if someone is willing to put forth a motion, or as Jason would say, move the motion. And essentially ask that the board authorize staff to expose the CPE audit rule changes in your packet under item 9C.
I make a motion, Jason Robinson, to have the, how do we want to put this?
As stated.
As stated.
Yes.
Let's see, I second.
Great. Any further discussion? You could say I, Jason Robinson, so moved. Yes. Okay, let's take a vote.
Joe Sullivan, aye. Logan Steele, aye.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Amy Lyons, aye. This seems like the most motions
We have a lot of motions.
ever.
Yeah. There's a lot.
There's a lot. Voting, saying our names many times. Okay, pipeline committee recommendations.
So this one's going to be a bit interesting because actually we are potentially just a few hours away from the bill becoming kind of getting sent off to the governor, but it's not actually law until the governor signs it. So in this, essentially we have rules in your packet that are coming from the pipeline committee, because you may recall that the board at its February board meeting this year authorized the pipeline committee because it really was the one doing the expert work on developing rules with assistance from specialty counsel in the tax section of DOJ named Melissa Cunningham, who's been really wonderful to work with. And essentially you have a very developed set of rules in your packet to implement this bill. There is a very specific motion that I wrote up into your chair agenda that I would ask you to state that motion as written. Once we get through a discussion here, and maybe it's just easiest for you to do the motion and then we just do the discussion of what the pipeline committee came out of there. But effectively, the motion is somewhat awkwardly worded because at this point, it still has to be dependent on final passage of the bill and signing of the bill by the governor, which makes it a little bit of a longer motion, but we're under the gun on this one because effectively, without having to schedule another board meeting, we need authority to come out of here for the staff. Once the bill is signed by the governor, passed by the legislature and passed by the governor, to file this so that we can stay on time with the rulemaking process to get to final adoption of this piece and the CPE audit rule piece at the September 25 board meeting, which means that those rules would then actually be effective on October 1 of 2025, which is the critical timeline that we need in order for a grant agreement to be able to be executed in October, the actual money transfer to happen in October or early November, which is what OSCPA would need as the intended initial grantee on the first cycle, right? To keep it all moving in time to get to scholarship awards in March of 26. So the timing here is, we're kind of bridging that, and that's reflected in the slightly awkward
Right.
motion language that I wrote into the chair agenda that I quite frankly don't know if council had a chance to see, but hopefully you're not.
Well,
too
when
pale.
I read it, she can listen to it.
The motion?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I wrote it, didn't
I wrote it. but-
So I need a motion to authorize staff to expose on or after July 1st, 2025, the CPE audit rule and the SB 796 proposed implementation rules as presented or amended. Does it mean or amended? Okay.
Yeah,
yes.
or amended, yeah.
Pending a final floor vote approval and final signature.
Hi, Jason Robinson, so moved.
Logan Steele, seconded.
Beautiful.
So now we can get to discussion.
Okay.
So, question is, do you have any questions around the specific rules that are actually in there that were heavily vetted through?
No, you don't have any questions.
Any concerns around what's being exposed, questions, and Logan, since you were at these meetings, please help me with any questions. Anyone?
No, that was pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
There we go.
Awesome. Yeah, good work. Thank you. Okay, we'll take a vote.
Joe Sullivan, aye.
Logan Steele, aye.
Jason Robinson, hi.
Rob Elzevia, aye.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Haley Lyons, aye. Awesome. Great. Okay. Board meeting date for January 2026. The proposal, Martin talked about this earlier, the proposal is for it to be on Thursday, January 26th, 2026
Yes.
versus 2029.
Oh, did I say 20? Oh my God.
Yeah.
That was not, that was, I know there's a couple of things on the chair agenda where
So it's the
I deliberately tried to trip you up or say something. If it's not deliberate.
It'd be the 29th.
That's what I was just gonna look at. Should it be, I think it should be January 29th, 2026.
Yeah, I did some serious dyslexia, or what's it called? Dyscalculia? What's it really good numbers? It's not dyslexia.
January.
It's dyscalculia.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I don't know that one.
Yeah, it's January 29, 2026,
Yeah.
the Thursday.
So,
It's what this was supposed to be. Oh my goodness. Oh my
yeah, so
goodness.
we need a motion, to have our board meeting on Thursday, January 29th, 2026.
Hi, Jason Robinson, so moved.
Logan Steele, seconded.
Nice. Any problem with that? Great. Joe, who won't be there, please vote.
Have fun, y'all. Joe Sullivan, aye.
Jason Robinson, hi.
Paperwork gets lost, but yeah.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Haley Lyons, aye. Great. Okay.
Surprised Joe didn't vote no, just.
All voted no, and then the lone voter of yes, and then it's like, great, you can come and do it. Okay, so Martin, you have 30 seconds or less to go over the NASBA report. Do you think you can do that? Would you like me to set a timer? No, just kidding.
That's actually gonna work. I said that, I will set a timer. I will set a timer, but basically, you have NASBA reports in your packets to keep you in the loop. You can read them on your own time. End of report.
Awful.
Thanks. I love it.
I love it. Good job, which is true, that we do have all those things in there and we can read them. I mean, obviously, the most significant being, in my opinion, the adoption of the UAA model law.
Yes, we should, that's probably, this actually only took me 10 seconds. So we should say 20 seconds on, this is significant that we have the UA thing approved.
That's good.
After the fact of, states for the legislation.
Okay, so we are running a bit ahead of schedule from an executive committee session, sort of. We have a couple of options. We can enter executive session and do all the ones where we don't have anybody appearing. and then come back? Or do we want to skip ahead to like item 13, like chair, vice chair?
The reports.
Yeah, I don't.
Either way works. Just keep us
Okay.
running. It's a super efficient board meeting, so.
Okay.
Keep us in public so you get to run through them.
Okay. Yep, I agree.
And if I were chair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going in and out is.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna skip ahead to item 13, report of chair. I have an assigned time limit of 2 hours on here. This is when Martin starts to get all punchy in the chair agenda. So the NASDA update, I've kind of dribbled in a few updates as we've gone through. I don't think there's anything else really significant there. The Western Regional is coming up at the end of the month, or in a week and a half. I will be there, Martin will be there, Megan Hartley will be there, Megan Kurtz will be there, Sherry will be there, and Ray will be there as well. So we have a nice Oregon presence at the meeting.
Plus Megan is willing to go a day early to do new board member training.
Which I get to lead. Yay! That'll be so fun, Megan. Yes, it will be great. I attempted to, the new board member training, for those of you who don't know, this is a little anecdote, there is this masterpiece theater skit that gets done. Megan, you'll just have the privilege, and it's the hokiest thing ever about like public meeting rules. And I suggested we change it. Everybody lost their minds and were like, well, you don't have time to review it. That could be that'll be my stamp on my time on the NASDA board, be to get this jump skit out of the new board member training and have it be something else. Just so you know what my objectives are. The things I do to keep myself interested in things. So Western Regional attendance is great. That should be awesome. Martin and I have been working on and chatting about committee appointments and kind of committee liaison appointments. There's several openings on different committees. So those are, in the works of getting in touch with folks and making sure that when they said they might be interested in serving on a committee, they meant it. I feel like that's how I got on the complaints committee, is I don't even recall saying, yes, I was interested in serving on a committee, but people do strange things. So that we'll have more information on that soon. In terms of outreach, Martin mentioned outreach. Both Martin and I separately presented at U of O in their Accounting 425 class. It's on ethics. Martin, about kind of the rules of the Board of Accountancy and what we do. I was there specifically to talk about a specific fraud case in the Eugene community. Yeah, so that was good. We were at the OSCPA Circle of Excellence, as Sherry talked about. Yeah. And now for the fun part. Recognition of board service for Joe Sullivan, who is gracing us at his last meeting today, unless the paperwork gets lost.
Again.
Yes, but Joe has spent a lot of time giving his time to the board, and we super appreciate it. I was on the complaints committee with Joe before he moved on to the board, and just your service and your leadership is greatly appreciated. So much of what we're doing today and what we've accomplished is because you were at the helm during that time and said, like, we need to do this. So I think you've made your mark on the profession for sure. And now you can go back to travel basketball all the time. So yeah, we really appreciate and thank you for all of your service.
Fair warning to everyone. There is a card in my office. This is the disadvantage of switching our public agenda thing around. There's a card that makes its way through the room for Joe, and there's a little bit of a content, a little bit of a gift inside there, but so
A little bit
we're
of a
not,
gift
we're not
because it's
fully
state
done with
budget.
the recognition because there's still a part that needs to circle the room, which I thought we could have done in executive session before we get to this after executive session. So we're not quite ready for that part, but there is something coming your way, Joe.
I wanted to get you a really big plaque to display in your office because I know how much people love plaques in their offices, and well, it just didn't work out.
Today.
Yeah.
It's still coming.
Big, super big, like, you know how people used to order the massive licenses? Like massive certificates, no one had an office to even put them in. So anyways, thank you for your service. There's cupcakes. So Marcus Joe doesn't like cake.
I told Andrew I like bourbon. So,
The newest bourbon possible.
yeah.
I suggest, I was gonna suggest.
Preferred, but yeah.
That's the bourbon, and then I was like.
I
are we
think
allowed-
the agency next door might have some happy stash.
Yeah.
So,
We should go knock on the door and see.
You mean the board of tax practitioners?
No.
OLCC.
The OLC.
Oh, yes.
See if we can get- Oh, I should have had you go over and see if you could have gotten them on the list.
I forgot about that. I thought they had left. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're still here.
We don't know.
Yeah. Well, in the interest of time, I don't have a speech, but it has been a pleasure working with everybody. It's very grateful to be on the board with all of you, and it's been the past couple of years. It's really taken a step back. It's actually really cool to see what we have accomplished, and if we're going to be on the board, we might as well do something really positive. And together, I think we've really done that. So appreciate all of you and having the chance to work together. So thank you, everyone.
Thank
You'll be
you.
missed, for sure. We'll call you, don't worry.
You're a spot on the Laws and Rules Committee.
You
Sign
could
back
come
up
back
for
to
the
the
board, yeah.
complaints committee.
Yeah, I don't know how many years I was on that, but a long time.
Yeah, it's
So
been a minute.
maybe sometime again.
It's time for a break.
Yeah, a little break would be good.
Yeah.
And-
I will not appoint, I will not.
Yes,
recruit-
and part of rolling off the board, a good thing is actually there's a lot of other really talented people that deserve a chance to be on the board, so I'm happy about that too.
Okay, and with that, we're gonna go to the report of the vice chair.
I have nothing at this time.
Great. Treasurer?
Still in a very great fiscal position. So thank you to Martin and staff for watching the budget. Keeping it in check.
Awesome. Okay, Martin, Executive Director update, assigned time limit, 1 minute max.
I think effectively you already know what's been happening and kind of what we've accomplished. So I'm not going to duplicate that here in my time. I do want to say I forgot to put in the packet an extremely nice email from a lady who attended yesterday the Laws and Rules Committee meeting because she was so excited about becoming initially licensed. She decided to celebrate it by just before going home to visit her family in her native India, that she would come and get her initial license card from Andrew, get the initial letter that I have to sign from me at the beginning of the LRC meeting, and she stayed for the meeting. And it was a really, really nice reminder of how much we're changing lives here. This is a person who was a direct beneficiary of our rules, allowing someone to become licensed. They take, actually, I'm gonna just, if I may I pass your phone around?
Yes.
This is actually a picture of her yesterday.
Tuesday.
At the Laws and Rules.
Yeah, I
Committee
was like, it
meeting.
wasn't yesterday.
She's a direct beneficiary of the LRC, with the help of the LRC, this board taking action saying, if you take more than 8 years to become licensed, there is now a pathway for you.
You've been out for 8 years.
I'm sorry,
Isn't it if you've been out for 8 years and then you can come back to it?
no,
No?
it's just if it takes you longer than 8 years, right? And this lady had literally passed her CPA exam in the 96.
96.
I believe, Andrew took her on very personally. This is basically a thank you email to Andrew, who was not the only staff person, but the primary staff person working this case. It was a really complicated case because we had to recreate her records, which were long shredded. We had to get NASBA on board, finding independent evidence of her passing the CPA exam in a database that had long been abandoned, and getting access to that database, getting those records out of there, put into the current NASBA database records. This one took a village, folks. And she's now here and she got her initial license. So I just wanted to make that my report because it's a really nice reminder of what we get to accomplish, right? And she's been working in public accounting. She's been helping with taxes and all that. She had no problems, demonstrating current experience, getting a supervisor sign off, right? But she was never able to finish that initial licensure piece, and now she was able to. So that's really for me. I wanted to just use the bump. Thank you, because I know gentleman behind me would be too humble to bring it up in his deputy director report, so I'm gonna do it for him. But he did a lot of work on this, and I think it should make all of us feel good around the direction that we've been moving in. So that's really all I want to say, because everything else is enveloped in all the other reports you've been getting around legislation and what we've been doing. So I'll stop there.
Thank you.
Sorry, that's longer than a minute.
That's okay. Andrew, Deputy Director update.
All right, just want to start off with something fun. We have 17 active licensees still that were granted before 1970. Our oldest current, most experienced licensee, the oldest, has been practicing with the state of Oregon for 23,414 days. Was granted 4/24, 1961. Wow, 64 years, 1 month and 12 days. And this is Michael Olds with Jack W. Olds and Company in Beaverton.
Did we check to see if he's still alive?
I did.
Okay.
Is he the one calling us? No. What prompted this was licensee reached out. He was having an issue with the renewal. No, it was the audit. And just out of curiosity, he asked, is there anyone that was granted before me? Because this was David Pearson and he was granted in 66. And I was like, there are 5 people before you that are still practicing. He's like, okay. I got to still hang on to my license. That's great. I've been him a couple times, one person. He is still actively involved with PCOB and teaching adjunct with Washington University in St. Louis. He got his DBA in 1964, and then right after that, passed the exams here in Oregon.
Yeah.
So it just, when this came out in the office, I just asked him, you know what? I think the board should know like these really fun data stories, because I don't think anyone here would have a clue that we have licensees going all the way back to the 1960s. It kind of blew my mind.
Wow. Going to renewals so far, using our prior renewal process, we received 171 so far. That's combined active, retired, and inactive. With the new process, we're at 763, which puts us about 200-ish ahead of where we were last year for receiving applications at this time. Really good with that.
Are you getting any feedback? Or
Jason Orm has gone through the process.
Super good.
You're like the super guinea pig on the audit, guinea pig on the renewal.
Back to, I must have done something on the LRC. I'm not sure. Hard to tell yet.
Tanya has also gone through the process. Her and the other Jason, Jr., JR, we're very key in helping doing beta testing with the process.
Right.
Thank you, Jason. You were super helpful.
Well, that's fun. Yeah, seriously.
For the record, my middle initial is R, so you made it more than that,
We're no longer allowed to sit next to each other, so it can be a clear head.
I did that as a little bit of chair hazing. I asked them to do that in the morning, just to make it more.
You did?
Yeah.
She did. Yeah.
It was a little bit of chair hazing.
Renewal on procurement, working with Brian with DAS procurement. We are just almost over the finish line within the next 2 weeks on special procurement that will carry us through September 26th or September of 2026. to be able to work with our current database vendor. And this will allow us to move off of the DAS IT server and move into the cloud and have a web-based database.
If I may,
Other-
go ahead, sorry.
No, good, you.
There's one piece in here just for full transparency. This isn't just about making things better. There are currently, this is kind of part of what it means to be state of Oregon, is that sometimes you have to navigate really difficult waters. And the simple truth is, this isn't just about making things better. Right now, because of our current setup, we're actually not able to upgrade our FileMaker versions to the latest versions that are actually supported because of where the server sits. So there's risk in the background here, a significant amount of risk, and we're desperately, Andrew has been working his rear end off, trying to get us to a better place, because this isn't just about making fun and nice things happen. It's actually even more about preventing bad things from happening, because we're currently unable to do really, necessary maintenance and version upgrades because of the setup that we're in. So we're finally getting the help that we need to actually get all the approvals to do all the necessary moves to get us to a better place there. So there's a little bit of a challenge in the background there. That's not just about fun, cool stuff, but it's also about preventing bad stuff. Sorry about my IT language.
No, it worked. Going back to protection, the board will also be having new key card access to the office installed before the next board meeting, and also new alarms with motion sensors and glass break detectors. You already proved it.
Okay. You serious?
Yes.
Okay.
Feels like it's.
Sounds like a good idea.
We've had 2 break-in attempts, and the OLCC had their window broken out.
They're probably thought this was the OLCC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tried to break it.
There's also the sensitive material that we have in here. Our own security is just a lock. So definitely want to upgrade that, and that will also help put us in line and following the Oregon County Manual for Protection of Funds.
We need to have a clear indicator on each door window. This is the Board of Accountancy. There is no liquor within.
No cabinets can be found here.
That is what I have.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Complaints committee. Tanya, no.
Yes, I have one thing. We need to correct on the minutes. The 4th page, item number 5 should be 2024 INQ-032. 3 ones listed twice,
Okay.
but
Thank you.
everything else is fine.
And Tanya, that's super helpful. We will make that correction. We don't formally adopt those because they do not function as minutes for us, but we will definitely correct it. So it's super helpful to know that, because it is important that we correct it, even though they're not officially minutes.
Right. Okay. Proc, that's me. Nothing to say about it. We had it. It was good.
Oh, summer. 8/24 summer. Yeah. We wouldn't discuss executive here in public.
You're looking at me because I need to do something, John. No. Okay. No one make eye contact with me unless you need something. It's like, usually it's been the people that don't look at me very often, then I'm like. Okay, ratification requests. We have CPA certificates and firm registrations. So I need a motion to approve the ratification request for individual CPE permits and firm registrations under items 19A and 19B as presented.
Jason Robinson, so moved.
Logan Steele, seconded.
Awesome. Any discussion? Great. Let's take a vote.
Joe Sullivan, aye.
Logan Steele, aye.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Rob Valdivia, aye.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Haley Lyons, aye. All right, thanks, guys. Okay, so that concludes the public agenda, short of motions on cases heard in executive session and consideration of settlement proposals. So we will take a little break to grab lunch and then come back for executive session.
Okay.
Great, okay, perfect.
So we are joining this meeting
We are.
at, temporarily recessing this meeting at.
11:45.
11:45.
Yep, so.
Okay.
Can someone turn up the volume?
Does anybody know if the recording is on? Okay.
Just said that the recording came back on my side.
Nailed it on ours.
Extremely loud on our side, and so it's like, yeah. Okay, this is the Board of Accountancy. Okay, I'm sorry. Good afternoon. This is Board of Accountancy Chair Haley Lyons. It is June.
I think so. One other thing my boys do. I'm gonna try to get it all right. They go to this.
We have to make sure we admit it and we don't have any other members of the public, right?
Nope, I don't think so.
Jen, G-E-N.
Okay, okay.
Robert
I am
Tiger.
now adjourning the
And it's like the same place, literature.
and calling the
Okay.
public session of the Board of Accountancy back to order.
Email
June 5th, the time
Okay,
is
yeah.
1:50 for the record.
It's pretty cool.
Let's do a roll call. Just because it's good measure.
Summertime is.
Haley Lyons,
Good
board chair.
thing to do side of.
Martin Piccioni, Executive Director.
Joe Sullivan, board member. Jeremiah Lippert, board staff.
Logan Steele, board member.
Jason Robinson, board treasurer.
Angie had board legal counsel, sorry.
Olivia, vice chair. Danny DeBarla, board staff.
Lee Stoddard, board staff.
Sharon McPherson, OSCPA.
Megan Hartley, board member.
Tanya Moffett, BOAC chair. And Megan's trying to get off mute.
There you go.
Megan Kurz, OSCPA Vice Chair and Board Liaison.
Thank you. That is everybody. Okay, we are on to item 11, motions on cases heard in executive session. Do I have any motions?
Do we want to say that we're moving case 24015 to our next board meeting? No, okay,
Yeah, no, we don't want to say that.
okay, I didn't say that.
So you didn't say it.
Okay.
Thank you for not saying it.
I'd like to make a motion for case 24-016 of sufficient evidence violation of OAR 801-030-0010, Pren 2, auditing standards. Oh, and my name is Jason Robinson.
Logan Steele, second.
Any discussion here? Let's vote.
Joe Sullivan, aye.
Logan Steele, aye.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Valdivia, aye.
Haley Lyons, aye.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Yeah, I'm supposed to go last. Thank you. Motion passes.
I make a motion, Jason Robinson, make a motion for case 24-019 for sufficient evidence in OAR 801-030-0010, Pren 1, Pren B, do professional care, OAR 801-030-0020, Pren 9, business transactions, and OAR 801-030-0020, Pren 8, Pren B, board communications.
Second. Logan Steele.
Okay, any discussion? Take a vote.
Joe Sullivan, aye.
Logan Steele, aye.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Rob Valdivia, aye.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Haley Lyons, aye. Okay.
I make a motion for case 24-017 for sufficient evidence in a violation of OAR 801-010-0080, Pren 2, Pren F, holders of certificates of license, and OAR 801-030-0020, Pren 8, Pren B, for communication.
Logan Steele, I second.
Any discussion?
Joe Sullivan, aye.
Logan Steele, aye.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Robert Olivia, aye.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Haley Lyons, aye. Motion passes. Any other motions?
I will make a motion. Hi, Jason Robinson, make a motion for cases 2018 RPT 053 057 058 and 2019 RPT 040 to close without further investigation.
Logan Steele, I second.
Discussion? No?
Joe Sullivan, aye.
Logan Steele, aye.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Robert Olivia, aye.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Haley Lyons, aye. Thank you.
And I would like to make a motion for closing inquiries -024 INQ -025 026 030 031 033 032. Okay. 038 039 041 042 045 046 047 048 049 2025-INQ -001 through 005, and finally 2024 INQ -040.
Logan Steele, I second.
Great. Any discussion? Take a vote.
Joe Sullivan, aye.
Logan Steele, aye.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Robert Olivia, aye.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Haley Lyons, aye. Great. Any other motions? We're done. Okay,
Efficient motion.
good job, Jason, thank you. What's on
I was trained by the best.
settlement? I know. I'm too far down.
Great.
Item 12, consideration of settlement proposals, agency case 22-014. Michael W. Nichols.
That should be case 24-014.
Sorry, that's my fault. Sure.
So this one was practicing while lapsed and not responding to the board. The settlement was revocation, 20,000 in penalties, 1,000 in costs, stayed 10,000 of the penalties and 1,000 in costs for a net payment of 10,000.
We have to vote on this?
Yes.
Okay. Can I have a motion to accept the settlement proposal as presented?
And just to be clear, the case number is 24014. That is correct in your actual documents. It was simply incorrect on the chair agenda, so I led you astray on the number, but it is 24-014. I just want to make sure that that's clearly reflected on the record.
Hi, Jason Robinson, so moved.
Logan Steele, I second.
Any discussion? Nope, let's take a vote.
Joe Sullivan, aye.
Logan Steele, aye.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Robert Olivia, aye.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Haley Lyons, aye. All right, motion passes. Joe, that was your final vote.
Very anticlimactic.
Okay, that concludes our meeting. Our next board meeting will be Thursday, September 25th. I am now adjourning this public meeting of the Board of Accountancy, and the time is now 1:58 p.m. Wow.